The words non-priority family member appeared in beautiful calligraphy under my name on the linen place card at my parents' 35th anniversary gala. The Minneapolis ballroom buzzed with 180 guests under glittering chandeliers as my mother leaned in close and said quietly but firmly, "That means no seat with the immediate family tonight. Do not make this about you." My name is Charlotte Reynolds. I am 34 years old. The sting of that public dismissal from the woman who was supposed to protect me after 9 months of my quiet sacrifices hit hard. That moment sparked something irreversible. Before I tell you the full story of how my mother's actions change everything forever, if you're watching and this kind of family betrayal resonates with you, please like and subscribe. Drop a comment with the city you're in and what time it is right now. I'd love to hear from you and know I'm not alone in this. Growing up in Minneapolis taught me the family rules long before I could put them into words. My mother, Susan Reynolds, ran our household like a carefully orchestrated campaign where every detail served the image she wanted the world to see. My father, David Reynolds, retired early from his accounting firm and mostly stayed quiet in the background. My older brother, Ethan Reynolds, became the golden example with his corporate law career and firm handshakes that opened doors. My younger sister, Isabella Mitchell, landed in marketing and married Connor Mitchell, whose family connections seemed to elevate everything. I was the middle one, the youth program coordinator at a local community center, the person who showed up, helped quietly, and never asked for the spotlight. My mother always initiated the little exclusions that added up over the years. She would call family meetings to plan holidays and assign roles, but my tasks were always the behind the scenes ones, like coordinating catering or cleaning up afterward, while my younger sister got to choose the centerpieces and pose for photos. When my brother brought home his first big promotion, my mother hosted a dinner and made sure the toast centered on him, then turned to me with a sweet smile and said, "You know how these things go, dear. Some roles just fit better than others." It was never loud or dramatic, but she made sure I felt the difference every single time. That pattern repeated when my sister announced her engagement 11 months earlier. My mother dove into planning their future events with the same precision she brought to everything. I offered to help in any way, but her responses were always polite deflections that left me on the edges. Still, I wanted to show I belonged, so I started saving in every small way I could. I packed lunches from home instead of buying them at the office, wore the same coats through another winter, and skipped any extras so I could put aside $11,000 in a certified check. The envelope sat in my bag with a simple note about celebrating their milestone together. I told myself the gift would finally prove my heart was in the right place. My colleague Lydia Morgan at the community center noticed the changes right away. She saw me eating leftovers at my desk and asked what I was saving for. When I explained the anniversary gift, she shook her head and said, "You always give more than you get back, Charlotte. Just make sure they see it." Her words stayed with me, but I pushed forward anyway. Meanwhile, my cousin Sophia Klein, who had always been more like a sister in the extended family, caught wind of the gala planning and offered to help with decorations. My mother accepted her help immediately, but kept me on the list for errands only. Sophia pulled me aside one afternoon after dropping off supplies and whispered, "Something feels off about how she's organizing this. Your family, too." I brushed it off then, but her observation planted the first real seed of doubt. The weeks leading up to the gala were filled with more of my mother's small but pointed decisions. She sent group texts about seating arrangements that somehow never included my input. When I drove across town to pick up the custom centerpieces after a long day at work, my mother thanked me on the phone, but then added in that same measured tone, "We need people who understand the big picture for the important parts, but your help with logistics is appreciated." It stung, yet I kept showing up. My brother Ethan joked about it during a quick call, but he never pushed back. My younger sister and her husband Connor stayed focused on their own circle, and my brother-in-law's mother, Diane Mitchell, seemed to float through the preparations without noticing the gaps. By the night of the gala, I had the check tucked safely in my bag and a simple black dress that felt appropriate for the evening. The ballroom looked perfect with tables arranged in precise hierarchy and the head table reserved for the core family. I scanned the seating chart displayed near the entrance and found my name at the very edge. My mother appeared beside me before I could process it fully. She tapped the card and delivered her line about the overflow table with that calm authority she always used when setting boundaries. The words landed like a quiet slap. Around us, guests chatted and laughed, unaware or unwilling to see what was happening. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but stayed silent at first the way I had for 34 years. My cousin Sophia arrived a few minutes later and spotted the card over my shoulder. Her eyes widened, but before she could speak, my mother turned and greeted her warmly, pulling her toward the main area. Lydia had come as my plus one since the invitation allowed it, and she caught my eye from across the room with a concerned look. The evening unfolded with toasts and laughter at the head table while I sat at the side with distant relatives. The meal served to our table was simpler, no wine pairing, just the basic option while the family enjoyed the full spread. My mother glanced my way once and gave a small nod as if everything was exactly as it should be. That was when the weight of the envelope in my bag felt heavier than ever. I had sacrificed so much for people who still saw me as extra, as non-essential. My mother had initiated every step of this exclusion from the planning jabs to this public label, and in that moment I knew I could not keep pretending it did not matter. I pushed my chair back slowly, napkin folded neatly beside the untouched plate. The couple next to me glanced up curiously. My hand closed around the envelope as I stood heart pounding with a mix of anger and clarity I had never allowed myself before. Across the room, my mother noticed the movement and started to rise, her expression shifting into that familiar mix of surprise and control. Just as I took the first step toward the gift table, my cousin Sophia caught my arm and whispered urgently, "Wait, Charlotte. There's something you need to know about how she planned this whole thing." Her grip tightened, and the look in her eyes told me the night was about to get far more complicated than I imagined. I turned sharply towards Sophia, my pulse racing as her urgent whisper hung in the air like a warning I could no longer ignore. She glanced over her shoulder to make sure no one from the head table could see, and quickly pulled out her phone, showing me a screenshot from the group chat she had been added to for last-minute decoration help. The message was from my mother, sent just 2 weeks earlier, spelling out exactly how the seating should go, and labeling me in plain terms as someone who did not need the full experience, because I would understand and stay quiet like always. My stomach dropped as I read the words directing the planner to use the non-priority designation and the basic menu option for my table, only all while praising my younger sister and her husband for their perfect contributions. Before I could even process it fully, my mother appeared at my side with that familiar, measured smile she reserved for moments when she needed to steer things back under control. She placed a hand on my arm, her grip light, but unmistakable in its intent, and said in a voice loud enough for nearby guests to catch Charlotte, "Dear, whatever this little scene is about now is not the time. You know how these events work, and making a fuss only embarrasses everyone who actually put in the real effort." Her words landed like a well-aimed jab, the kind she had perfected over decades, turning my hurt into something that looked like my own overreaction. Sophia stepped back slightly, but her eyes stayed locked on mine in silent support, and across the room I saw my colleague, Lydia Morgan, rising from her seat as if ready to step in if things escalated. I pulled my arm free gently but firmly, the envelope in my bag suddenly feeling like the only thing I still controlled in this entire evening. "This is not a fuss, Mother," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my hands trembled. "This is me, finally seeing the pattern you have been building for years." My mother's expression tightened, that polished mask slipping just enough for me to see the flash of irritation she usually hid so well. She leaned in closer and whispered sharply, "You have always been the one who needs reminders about your place, and tonight is no different. Sit down and stop drawing attention before your father and brother have to get involved." It was classic her initiating the cut with that calm authority while framing me as the problem, and I felt the years of small exclusions and quiet sacrifices rising up all at once. My older brother Ethan noticed the tension from the head table and started to stand, but my mother waved him back with a subtle gesture, handling it herself as she always did. My younger sister Isabella glanced over with wide eyes, her husband Connor shifting uncomfortably beside her, while his mother, Diane, watched the exchange with polite curiosity that bordered on concern. I did not wait for more instructions. I walked the remaining steps to the gift table, lifted the plain envelope from the stack, and slid the certified check out right there in front of everyone. The ballroom noise seemed to dip as a few heads turned, but my mother followed quickly, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. You cannot seriously be doing this, she hissed, her voice low, but laced with the kind of controlled fury that made guests pretend not to notice. After everything we have done to include you tonight, you choose to embarrass the family like this. The words stung because they came straight from her, the woman who had orchestrated the entire label and the reduced treatment. Yet she stood there acting as if I was the one breaking the rules. I folded the check once and tucked it into my jacket pocket, then placed the empty envelope back on the table, exactly where it had been. I am not embarrassing anyone, Mother, I replied, meeting her eyes without flinching. You did that when you decided I was non priority at your own anniversary celebration. The gift was earned through months of choices you never had to make, and I am taking back what was never really wanted anyway. Sophia moved closer, then her presence a quiet anchor, while Lydia crossed the room to stand beside me, her face set in quiet solidarity. My father remained seated at the head table, watching but saying nothing the way he had for most of my life, and my aunt, Karen Bennett, who had arrived earlier to help with the flowers, caught my eye from across the room with a look that said she had seen enough of this pattern over the years. The tension hung thick as my mother recovered her composure and turned to the nearest guest with a light laugh, dismissing the moment as a small family misunderstanding. But I could see the calculation in her eyes, the way she was already planning how to spin this later. She leaned in one last time and said softly enough for only me to hear, "You will regret turning this night into something about you, Charlotte. Some people simply do not understand what family loyalty looks like." That line, delivered with her signature sweetness masking the blade, pushed me past the point of staying silent. I turned away from the table, the check now safe in my pocket, and started toward the exit, my cousin Sophia and colleague Lydia falling into step beside me without a word. Behind us, the music picked up again, but the damage was done, and the evening that was supposed to celebrate my parents had instead exposed the cracks my mother had spent years widening. We made it to the lobby before my younger sister caught up her dress, swishing as she hurried after us. "Wait, you cannot just leave like this," Isabella said, her voice cracking in a way that almost sounded genuine. But before she could finish, my mother appeared again, this time with my father and brother in tow, closing the distance in the wide hallway where the chandeliers cast long shadows. The confrontation felt inevitable now, yet something in Sophia's earlier revelation told me there was more proof waiting if I chose to dig for it. My Aunt Karen stepped forward, then placing a gentle hand on my shoulder and murmuring, "I have seen texts from your mother about this setup for weeks. You are not imagining any of it." Her quiet confirmation sent a fresh wave of clarity through me, but my mother cut in immediately, her tone sharpening as she addressed the small group. "This is exactly why certain family members should not be given important roles, Charlotte. You always turn things upside down when things do not go your way." The words hung there heavy with the weight of every past slight she had initiated, and I realized in that moment that the real reckoning was only beginning. I had the check, I had witnesses, and I had the first real evidence that this was never about a single gala night. Yet as my mother stood there expecting me to fold like I always had, a new plan started forming in my mind, one that involved gathering everything and calling for a family meeting the following weekend. What I did not know yet was how deeply those gathered messages and emails would cut when I finally laid them out on the table, or how much it would cost me to stop being the one who absorbed it all in silence. The words hung there heavy with the weight of every past slight she had initiated, and I realized in that moment that the real reckoning was only beginning. I had the check, I had witnesses, and I had the first real evidence that this was never about a single gala night. Yet, as my mother stood there expecting me to fold, like I always had, a new plan started forming in my mind, one that involved gathering everything and calling for a family meeting the following weekend. What I did not know yet was how deeply those gathered messages and emails would cut when I finally laid them out on the table, or how much it would cost me to stop being the one who absorbed it all in silence. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages before I even finished my coffee. My mother started the barrage, of course, texting the whole group chat at 7 in the morning, with a carefully worded note about how certain family members had chosen to ruin a beautiful evening meant for celebration. She did not name me directly in the first line, but everyone knew. My father replied with a single thumbs up emoji, the same neutral response he had given my whole life. My older brother Ethan sent a private message telling me to smooth things over before it got worse. My younger sister Isabella stayed silent, probably letting my mother handle the opening salvo as usual. Sophia texted me separately with more screenshots from the planning thread, and Lydia called right after breakfast to say she had recorded a short voice note from the gala where my mother had pulled the planner aside and given extra instructions about my table. The evidence was piling up faster than I expected, but my mother kept initiating every new twist, following up her group text with a call to me personally where she said, "Charlotte, if you think keeping that money will make you feel better about your choices, you are only proving why we had to label things the way we did." Her words landed with that familiar sharpness, turning my stand into another example of my supposed selfishness. I listened without interrupting, then told her I wanted a family meeting at her house that Sunday for brunch. No excuses. She paused, then agreed with a sigh that sounded almost theatrical, adding, "Fine, but do not expect everyone to drop everything for another one of your dramatic moments." That jab set the tone for the week. Messages kept coming, each one from her, first framing me as the instigator while my sister and brother chimed in to echo her. Diane, my brother in law's mother, even reached out once to say she had noticed the tension at the gala and hoped we could all move past it, but my mother jumped into that thread too, replying before I could, with, "Some people need more time to understand family priorities than others." By Sunday, I had everything printed and organized in a plain folder. Carla Simmons, the gala planner, who had coordinated every detail, had emailed Sophia copies of the seating notes after the event when she heard about the fallout. Carla had written back confirming my mother's direct instructions, non-priority placement for me, only basic menu, no wine, and a note that I would not mind because I always handled things quietly. Sophia brought those prints with her to the meeting, and Lydia offered to come as moral support, but stayed in the car outside in case things turned ugly. I walked into my parents' house in suburban Minneapolis with the folder under my arm, the $11,000 check still safe in my bag, and a calm I had not felt in years. My mother greeted me at the door with a tight hug that felt more like a trap than affection. She pulled back and said immediately, "Charlotte, I hope you are here to apologize and return what belongs to the family celebration because this nonsense has gone on long enough." There it was, her opening move again, initiating the attack before anyone even sat down. My father sat at the head of the dining table with his newspaper, silent as always. My brother Ethan leaned back in his chair, scrolling his phone, while my sister Isabella and her husband Connor exchanged glances. Diane sat beside them, looking uncomfortable. Sophia took the chair next to mine, offering a small nod of support. My mother served the quiche and poured juice with perfect hostess precision, then launched right back in. "We all make sacrifices for family events, dear, but turning this into a public spectacle was beneath you." I let her finish the opening jab, then set my fork down. "Mother, this is not about spectacle. This is about the pattern you started years ago and made clear at your anniversary gala." Before she could respond, I opened the folder and laid out the pages one by one. The first was Carla Simmons's email chain, showing my mother's explicit directions for my non-priority status. My mother's face went pale, but she recovered fast and said sharply, "Those are out of context, Charlotte. I was simply managing limited space so the important guests would not feel crowded." The second page was Sophia's screenshot of the group chat, where my mother had written that I would sit quietly like I always did. My mother leaned forward, her voice cutting through the room. "You had no right to involve outsiders in private family matters, and if you think showing old messages changes anything, you're only making yourself look bitter." Connor shifted in his seat and asked to see the papers, reading them slowly while my sister tried to downplay it. "It was just planning details. Mother is right. You always overthink these things," but my mother cut her off, initiating the next attack herself. "See, Charlotte, even your sister sees how you twist everything. Keeping that money will not fix your need for attention." The words were classic, her laced with that psychological jab that made my achievements and sacrifices sound like flaws. Ethan tried to mediate, but my mother waved him off and kept going. "If you had contributed more meaningfully instead of playing the victim, none of this would have happened." Diane finally spoke up, saying quietly that the seating had seemed odd to her too, but my mother turned on her next. With all due respect, Diane, you do not know how our family operates, and Charlotte has always required special handling. The room grew tense as Sophia slid the final print across the table. Carla's follow up note confirming the reduced menu was my mother's specific request. My mother stared at it, then looked at me with eyes that held no apology, only calculation. You think this proves something? It only shows I was protecting the evening from someone who never quite fit the picture. That line delivered, with her signature calm venom hung in the air. I stood up slowly, folder in hand. I am keeping the $11,000, Mother, not out of spite, but because it was never just money. It was 9 months of choices I made while you decided I was non-priority. I will not sit at the edge of the table anymore, literally or figuratively. My father finally looked up, his expression unreadable, but he said nothing. Isabella started to cry, but my mother initiated the closing blow. If you walk out now, Charlotte, do not expect a seat at any future family table. Some people simply choose to be alone. I walked to the door with Sophia beside me, the weight of irreversible loss settling in my chest, even as I felt the first real sense of freedom. In the weeks that followed, the fractures spread quietly. My mother kept sending group messages framing me as unstable, but Carla Simmons reached out directly to confirm she had never seen such deliberate exclusion in 20 years of planning events. Diane and Connor distanced themselves from the worst of it, and my brother Ethan eventually sent a short text saying he wished things were different, but he could not get involved. My father met me once for coffee at a quiet diner, admitting he had seen the planning notes, but stayed silent because it was easier. He did not fight for me, and that silence hurt almost as much as my mother's words. I deposited the check into a new savings account, a promise to myself that I would never again earn approval by shrinking. At work, my youth program felt more meaningful than ever, and Lydia became a steady friend who reminded me daily that real family does not need labels. Sophia stayed close too, the cousin who had witnessed everything and chosen to stand up. Yet the cost was real and permanent. Holidays passed without invitations, phone calls stopped, and the empty chair at every imagined table became a reminder of what I had lost by refusing to stay non-priority. My mother never reached out again, and neither did my sister. The family I had tried so hard to belong to simply closed the gap where I used to be, as if I had never mattered. In the end, I gained my self-respect and the freedom to stop performing for a table that never saved me a real seat, but I lost the illusion of belonging that had carried me through 34 years. It was a partial victory, quiet and bittersweet, the kind that leaves you stronger but undeniably alone in the spaces where family used to be. I still keep the place card in a drawer, not as a trophy, but as proof that choosing myself was the only option left. If my story taught me anything, it is that some mothers build hierarchies instead of homes, and the bravest thing you can do is stop volunteering to be at the bottom of them. Thank you for listening to my story all the way through. It still stings to tell, but sharing it feels like one more step toward healing. If you have ever been labeled non-priority by your own mother and wondered whether walking away was worth the loneliness that followed, tell me in the comments. Would you keep the money and the boundaries even knowing the family table would never be the same again? I read every single one.